Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, today I want to talk about what is, in my opinion, the very best manga in Weekly Shonen Jump right now, which currently does not have an anime. So whether you like it or not, manga readers, anime is more popular than manga. The cycle goes as following: an epic, game-changing manga is created, which manga fans rejoice and love and cherish, but most people don't even know that they exist until they get an anime adaptation. And even beyond getting the adaptation itself, it usually takes people a few episodes, usually through about a whole season, before they become invested in the show. Maybe even it takes longer than that. Meanwhile, for the people who are reading the manga, they're just sitting there anticipating when everyone will figure out just how great it is, when they finally get to those epic climactic moments. So anyway, the long and short story here is that I think that there is an absolutely great manga in Weekly Shonen Jump right now that not enough people are talking about. Now, people are talking about it. It's probably the most buzzed about manga, again, that does not have an anime right now, but still, because anime is more popular than manga, it hasn't quite hit the mainstream yet. And so what are we talking about? Well, if you actually read Weekly Shonen Jump or you purchased a subscription to it, probably only two names come to mind. That would be Dr. Stone and The Promised Neverland. Frankly, I think that it's too soon to have an accurate judgment of how good Dr. Stone may end up being. So of course today, we're going to spread the greatness, which is The Promised Neverland. If you enjoy reading manga and you are not currently reading The Promised Neverland, I highly suggest that you start. And if you are somebody who only watches the anime, you should highly anticipate when an anime adaptation is announced for this show, because I feel very confident it will explode. Assuming, of course, that the anime adaptation follows the manga and is of, passable quality at the least. And so I guess the reasonable question to ask now is JB, what is The Promised Neverland? Why is it so good? And so in order to explain this properly, I think that it's best for you to take a moment and read the very first chapter. Going into the first chapter blind is 100% the best way to enjoy it. And it really is impossible for me to talk more about The Promised Neverland, more than just say a couple minutes, without spoiling the first chapter. Because chapter 1 goes from 0 to 100 real fast, and pretty much sets up everything which makes The Promised Neverland great. And so now I'm going to assume that you have read it, or you read it in the past, or you need more convincing to actually read the first chapter. So let's explain The Promised Neverland. The Promised Neverland is about several orphans, the orphanage they were raised in, and their perils and adventures. In the beginning of the story, life for them couldn't be any more perfect. Despite being orphans, the home provided to them by their mama is just about as good as any family could possibly provide. They had very little, if anything, to actually complain about. That is, in typical dramatic sense, they learned the dark and secret reality behind their cherished home. The truth is that it's not really an orphanage, as no children had ever actually been adopted from it. They learn that this place is more accurately described as a farm, a human farm providing top quality food for demons. What would you do finding out that your entire reality is a lie? Well, in The Promised Neverland, these kids decide to find a way out. And so what ensues from this point is one of the best shonen cat and mouse stories I have ever read. As far as anime manga I have seen, it's really only comparable to Death Note. Escaping is never as simple as it seems, with enemies and obstacles in every direction. The only way to escape is with sharp intellect, masterful plans, manipulation, and a bit of luck. These prodigy children, created for the purpose of providing the best quality human flesh and brains, are forced to match wits with pretty much everyone, from demons to other humans, even their own mama, the person who raised them in their orphanage. All for the purpose of finding safety. As I said earlier, comparing this to Death Note, if you enjoy Death Note and the battles of the mind between Kira and L, then this is pretty much the story for you. And I think that this by itself would probably tempt a lot of people to check it out. Death Note is extremely popular. Whenever I actually recommend anime, I always start off with Death Note. The concept of the cat and mouse is extremely enjoyable. The Promised Neverland doesn't really need to do anything else in order to be amazing and enjoyable. But I really think that this is what puts it over the top for me. It really isn't all it's about. There are several other elements which, in my opinion, make it great, individually. My channel was, as you should know, created for One Piece theories initially, and most of my subscribers are here for my perspective on One Piece. And if you've been a fan of One Piece for a long time, you should know that one of the things that makes it a classic even before it is even finished is the amazing world building, adventure, and sense of wonder. Reading One Piece takes you to a different place, which, while different than what is actually real, it feels real. And somehow the Promised Neverland seems to have captured a bit of this magic. What lies beyond the walls of the orphanage? If everything we know is a lie, is the world what we thought that it was? Even if we escape, what's out there? These are just some of the questions that you should be asking for yourself after reading the first chapter. I'm unsure if a lot of you out there have seen Gurren Lagann, but essentially it's a critically praised anime, and what makes it really interesting is that the scope of the world itself grows as you progress through the episodes. I would say that the Promised Neverland is similar. The scope of the world just keeps growing, and it does so, in my opinion, in very fantastical and satisfying ways. In many respects, there's also a lot of similarity between the Promised Neverland and another popular anime manga, Attack on Titan. Humanity as we know it lives within walls, forced inside by man-eating monsters, all the while craving understanding of the world and protection from its dangers. There's this dual sense of horror and wonder that occurs when you read Attack on Titan, and again, I think that you get a similar feeling from reading The Promised Neverland. I think a huge part of what made Attack on Titan amazing was the creation of interesting and engaging mysteries which we couldn't help but need to find answers for. Even again comparing it to One Piece, this is also something One Piece incorporates in its stories with the poneglyphs and the lost history. The Promised Neverland also builds similar mysteries which implore us to read more. What is real and what is not? Why are we here? Why are demons here? Where is everyone else? Among many other mysteries which would be spoiler level if I talked about them. So honestly guys, I think that there are 3 individual elements of this story that each taken by themselves would make The Promised Neverland good, if not great, but combined create something that I think is truly refreshing. Well thought out games of wit between the heroes and their enemies, a never-ending supply of mysteries we can't wait to unravel, and a breathtaking, well-imagined world. But of course, there's always more to say. I mean, when you're talking about a good manga, you just can't be defined by just 3 things. It's also important to look at, the smaller things and also the little things which all come together in order to create this ambitious story. Some of these things include like the characterization of the characters themselves, the pacing, the artwork, how the author decides to panel, like what he decides to draw and what he doesn't, and is set up to those panel, and even the themes, the deeper thoughts that can be created, the ideas that inspired the story itself, which can be explored further outside of the story. Now honestly guys, I consider myself to be little better than a novice when it comes to analyzing these kinds of things. As you guys know, I do theories. I enjoy looking at what may happen in a story, and I'm not necessarily an expert as to what makes a story great. But in my eyes, The Promised Neverland checks all of the boxes. Even with these 3 great elements mentioned before, it doesn't automatically make for a great story. If the characters are bland, if their actions don't make any sense, if their obstacles aren't engaging, if the villains don't seem real, if the story doesn't seem to be going anywhere per chapter, if the author fails to capture the moments that they are envisioning, to create a sense of being where the characters are or feeling their emotions, or they don't properly set up these moments, or the artwork can't immerse you in the world, the story could still be shit. But in all these areas, for me, The Promised Neverland is, again, just great. As I said before, guys, if it gets an anime, I think that it's pretty much a done deal. The Promised Neverland is 70 chapters in, approximately, but already it feels like a classic. But anyway, I've spent a while praising it, and I think that it's deserving of all the praise that it could possibly get. But there are certain elements that I do think that it lacks in. But just keep in mind here that these things are extremely cherry-picked, things that I just want to mention because It's something that I noticed, and my preferences in reading stories / things that I think that people who are going to watch my video might find interesting, but it might not matter to you. Firstly, despite The Promised Neverland being essentially a horror comic, at least that's pretty much the general idea behind what's going on here. You have demons eating humans. I think that this isn't one of the strongest aspects of the story. Like, if you were to compare Attack on Titan with The Promised Neverland, Attack on Titan is just so much more intense, despite essentially the same thing occurring. The easiest way to describe this is that Attack on Titan focuses on the graphic nature of what's occurring in that world, emphasizes the horror of it, whereas The Promised Neverland more approaches it from a perspective of its possibility. So essentially, The Promised Neverland is more family-friendly. But as with all things that I've said before in this video and after what I'm going to say here, these are subject to change because The Promised Neverland is still relatively new. Secondly, I don't think that The Promised Neverland is very funny, nor does it really try to be. Obviously, there's a limit to what one story can possibly achieve per chapter. If you go for too much, then it subtracts from the whole, I think. And so if you're looking for something that'll make you laugh a lot, this probably won't satisfy that need for you. And so third, what I want to talk about in terms of the games of wit in this series, I personally think that Death Note did it better. But honestly, Death Note is probably my favorite anime ever. The only anime I've watched in its entirety more than 5 times, so I don't really consider that to be a negative. You're at a fine line when constructing a story to be logically sound in terms of decision-making between supposed geniuses. Being geniuses, you expect every decision that they make to make sense. In addition to this, you expect them to think of new ways of approaching the same problem, also keeping in line with what is logically sound. Basically, you have to combine this aspect of storytelling, all the while with the geniuses actually being geniuses. It is incredibly difficult to pull off. I do think that there are times where the heroes in The Promised Neverland act upon assumptions that are not as guaranteed as they suggest them to be. But I can't really talk about this without spoilers, so if you do want me to talk about this, make a video on this in the future, be sure to say so in the comment section. It could just be that maybe I don't understand the assumptions that they're making and the rules that govern them. That's definitely possible, but we won't find out here. But do remember that The Promised Neverland almost always nails it. I'm talking about very specific instances. And so fourth, as with my second problem, keeping in mind again that this problem is an over-exaggeration, the world-building aspects of the story are again inferior to some of the best that you may have read, similar to like One Piece. The Promised Neverland may be inferior in some of its individual parts to other things that exist, but again, it's the unique collection of these great parts which make it exceptional. Although, just as a side note, the mysteries in The Promised Neverland are, in my opinion, just about as top tier as you're going to find. And so lastly, guys, this probably shouldn't be a problem, but it may end up being for some people. If you're looking for a straight-up battle shonen, The Promised Neverland has its moments, but for the most part, doesn't emphasize or have its strength in action. There is combat and there is action, don't get me wrong, but I think that the amount is perfect for what the story tries to achieve. But this is not really a battle shonen in the way that we typically perceive it. For a lot of people, this might be great. As many shonen jumps, comics have tried to recreate the success of Dragon Ball, and then afterwards One Piece, Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, Bleach, to the point that you can find knockoffs everywhere. Martial arts, magical ability transformations, and the like. But if this is pretty much all you enjoy, you probably won't find what you like here. But yeah, anyway guys, I just wanted to share my thoughts about The Promised Neverland. I wanted to recommend it, talk about what makes it amazing, and talk about the few things that I think that might be interesting to know that it's not necessarily the best in. I honestly can't wait until The Promised Neverland gets its anime so that more people can enjoy it. But for manga readers or those who may be tempted to read The Promised Neverland as a manga, it exists and it is well worth your time. But as always, let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you agree with the things that I said here. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you have more to add. That wouldn't surprise me. Just share your thoughts in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.